I'm Cynthia Turner, 28, and there's one moment in my life I'll never forget. The conference room at Country Club Plaza in Kansas City was buzzing with whispers and the rustle of papers when the door swung open and I stepped inside. The sound of my crutches clicking against the floor cut through the tension like a blade. My family sat there smug, certain the victory was theirs, but their faces went pale the second they saw me standing tall, alive, even as my legs trembled and throbbed with pain. My mother was the first to rise, panic breaking through her composure. "No, this can't be." She stammered, voice cracking like she'd just seen a ghost. The room fell silent, every breath held hostage. They had left me to fade in a hospital bed for 6 months alone, my body stubborn and heavy, enduring grueling physical therapy that made me want to scream. 6 months with only a single call from them, a bitter reminder that I was a burden. They thought they could seize my $8 million CEO position, take the education tech company I built, forge documents, and silence me. But they were wrong. I remember that fateful day before everything, returning to my Overland Park home with an investment contract in hand, my heart full of joy, unaware that dinner had been drugged, unaware that my own sister had turned envy into a scheme to end my life. The accident should have finished it all, but here I was. Now standing in that conference room, I was no longer a victim. I had clawed my way out of the hell of betrayal, ready to expose every plan, to look them in the eye, and force them to confront the truth. In the hardest moments, when choosing between holding them accountable and offering a second chance, what would you choose? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your story and perspective might be a light for someone else. If you resonate with this journey, drop a like, hit subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next story. Together we find strength and empathy in real experiences. A week after my promotion to CEO at the Country Club Plaza office, I drove back to our suburban Overland Park house, heart racing, hands tight on the wheel, the $8 million contract folded in my bag. The education app I'd built to help kids who struggle with reading had finally earned investor trust. Every sleepless night, every half-finished prototype, every line of code had paid off. I was 28, a software developer turned CEO, and I imagined how my family would look at me, pride mixed with surprise. But there was also a knot of unease in my chest. The house glowed warm against the evening, and when I stepped inside, my sister was already at the table, rigid, a narrow, measuring look on her face. She was 32, a sales director who always smiled and charmed at meetings. Tonight, that smile was gone and something darker sat in its place. I lifted the contract a little and said, "Guess what? I did it. CEO. Funding secured." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "That app. You mean the one I introduced to half your investors? The one I stayed up late polishing?" I paused, feeling the quiet clawing of jealousy, the way people claim the shine of someone else's work, and tried to steady my voice. "Come on, this was my vision, my win. Let's celebrate." She slammed her chair back, the legs screeching against the floor. "Celebrate what you steal all the attention again." The kitchen smelled of roast and herbs. We sat and tried to eat, but the air between us hummed like a live wire. "You think you're so special?" She spat, throwing a glass of wine hard enough that I reached to steady it. "This isn't a contest. This is our accomplishment," I said, trying to diffuse it, because that's what I'd always done, smoothed over the things that cut. She wouldn't hear it. "Without my contacts, you'd be nothing," she snapped, and suddenly, all the nights of solo coding the prototype fixes at 2 a.m. The unpaid freelance pitching felt like they were being erased by a single sentence. My voice trembled. "You always put me down." We finished dinner in a brittle silence, small complaints snapping like embers. Later, I grabbed the keys to run an errand and felt dizzy. She offered to drive with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I agreed, but as I backed down the driveway, the world-tilted headlights flared and my car slammed into the fence. Blackness swallowed me. I woke to sterile beeps in a Kansas City hospital, my head pounding and my legs numb. A nurse leaned over. "You're awake. You were unconscious for hours after the crash." I croaked. "My legs," and she hesitated. "You're temporarily paralyzed from the trauma therapy will begin soon." Then she asked about family. I managed to say their names and felt my chest drop. Would they come? Would there be any regret? Or just the same cold absence I'd known before? Memory hit me, the smiles that were scripts, the times I'd been sidelined the way I'd been left to patch things together while others took credit. Part of me wanted to scream at them, to look me in the face, to watch what they'd tried to erase stand up and demand its place. But another quieter part of me breathed. I was alive. I still had agency. And I would decide the cost for every person who'd tried to ruin me. This was no longer only survival. It was a promise of return, of claiming power by being present, by using the mind and influence they assumed I would never get back. Even with numbness in my limbs, a fierce anger fused with strength, a fire I couldn't and wouldn't let die. This time, no one would intimidate me into silence. I would rise, step out of the dark, and force my family to see me alive, proud, and stronger than ever, contract in hand, my dreams intact, and with the right to choose my own path. This time, there would be no room for cowards and selfishness. The days dragged like hot tar beneath my feet, stretching into weeks in the sterile hospital room in Kansas City, where I lay alone, no sign of my family at the door. The monitors beeped steadily, a relentless reminder of grueling physical therapy sessions where my limbs refused to cooperate no matter how hard I tried. I kept glancing down the hallway, hoping to hear familiar footsteps or a voice I knew, but there was only emptiness. Nurses came and went, updating me on my progress, but the void at home gnawed at me, devouring each slow day, amplifying the ache of abandonment. One afternoon, after an exhausting session that left my body trembling, my older brother appeared. He was 35, a calm accountant who usually avoided family conflict, but offered only the thinnest emotional support. He stood there, hands shoved in his pockets, avoiding my gaze. "Hey," he said bluntly, dragging a chair closer to my bed. I forced a smile. "You came. So what's happening at home?" He shifted, shook his head. "Everyone's busy. Dad's stressed with deadlines. Mom's caught up with the house. They'll visit soon." His words were hollow, and I could see the evasion in his weary posture. I pressed, gentle but firm. "Soon, it's been weeks." He nodded vaguely, citing traffic and schedules, never asking how I felt, never staying to talk. 20 minutes later, he mumbled, "Get better," and left quietly, leaving the room colder than it had ever been. I stared at the ceiling, emptiness and rage cutting into me like a blade. That night, my sister showed up, unannounced, rain drumming on the window. She stood at the foot of my bed, arms crossed, a look of pity and triumph on her face. "Still here, huh?" Her voice was low, sharp, tinged with sarcasm. I tried to straighten up, gripping the sheet. "Why are you here?" She stepped closer, eyes glittering under the fluorescent lights. "Just checking in." "You're holding everyone back," dragging this out, her words like a slap, underscoring that I wasn't even important enough to be cared about. I bit my lip and whispered, "What do you mean?" She smirked. "The company keeps moving forward without you. Someone has to lead." The message was clear. She was angling for my CEO position, dismissing all the effort I'd poured in. "Whether you recover or not," she said coldly, turning away. Her footsteps echoed down the hallway, leaving me alone with fury and a sharper sense of betrayal than any physical pain. The next morning, my parents called, voices low, as if afraid to disturb the line from the suburbs. Dad spoke first, cold. "We heard about the accident. How are your legs?" I explained the therapy, the slow progress. He muttered, "Sounds tough, but now you're a burden, bills piling up, work put aside. We can't drop everything." Mom interjected, soft but cutting. "He's right. Focus on healing. We'll handle the rest." No promises of visits, no encouragement, just the old habit, prioritizing everything except me. I hung up the receiver, heavy in my hand, their indifference a wall that couldn't be broken. Weeks turned into months, the loneliness thick as fog. Therapy dragged on, endlessly small victories overshadowed by the void left by my family. Their absence wasn't just emotional neglect. It was a deliberate silence forcing me to stand on my own to face the isolation and mental anguish and to confront them with the truth of their betrayal. That weekend, I lay half-conscious in my hospital bed in Kansas City, every muscle aching when April, my one steadfast friend from the Country Club Plaza office, slipped in with that worried face I'd come to trust. She hugged me, gently, stared at the tangle of tubes, then sat down and said, voice tight, "I had to fight to get in. Visiting's been restricted." Warmth crawled through me like a small rescue. She pulled out her phone and said, "You need to see this," then opened a thread of forwarded internal emails from the shared drive. My stomach dropped at the first headline, an email from my sister to the board declaring Cynthia will assume interim CEO duties. Cynthia's leadership will keep momentum on the app, followed by another message bragging about leadership vision and claiming credit for the $8 million funding. April's face went hard. "She's stealing your role," she said, disgust plain in her voice. I felt betrayed so sharply I could taste it. Every line of code, every feature, every late-night test was mine. "How could she?" I whispered. April's jaw tightened. "Check your bank." My fingers shook as I logged in. A red banner flashed, account frozen. My heart pounded as I read the court order concern regarding capacity freezing our investment funds. April snapped, "This is not coincidence. Your sister's behind the petition. Rumors at the firm point to her." The pieces slotted into place, her smirking hospital visit, the thinly veiled offers of help. I called the bank, voice hoarse, "Please confirm this freeze." The clerk was clinical order, relates to a health capacity concern. Funds will remain restricted, pending resolution. Incapacity, weaponized and legal. They hadn't only abandoned me, they'd tried to lawfully erase me. That afternoon, Dr. Andrea Reed came by, tablet in hand, eyes both kind and sharp. "I reviewed your chart," she said. "Something's wrong. Sedative notes and neurologic symptoms were added after your admission." I leaned in. "What do you mean?" She tapped timestamps. Entries were altered, post-admission recovery time, exaggerated documentation that facilitated the financial freeze. There may be external influence. The room tilted. My sister hadn't just left me. She'd engineered my impotence, betting I wouldn't fight back. "Who would do this?" I asked. Dr. Andrea's face was steely. "We're investigating, but signs point to intentional action linked to your work." April squeezed my hand, eyes fierce. "This is fraud. You have to push back." Heat replaced the numbness in my legs, rage that was not blind jealousy but righteous fire. This was a setup meant to steal my career while I couldn't defend it. The evidence in my hands felt like leverage I'd been missing. It was the fulcrum I would use to tear the net down and take back what was mine. A few days later, still trapped in that sterile Kansas City hospital room, with wires running across my body and the steady beeping of the heart monitor filling the silence, I dialed the number April had given me and met James Reed, a sharp 30-something attorney in a crisp suit that hadn't lost its crease despite the drive from downtown. He sat by my bed, opened a thick binder, and in a voice calm but cutting said, "The emails and records April passed along. They're damning, but we need more evidence to make this airtight." He flipped to a fresh affidavit signed by Dr. Andrea Reed. "This confirms the irregularities," James explained. "Extended sedative entries, exaggerated notes about cognitive decline, all added after your admission. Not negligence, deliberate sabotage meant to support the claim you're incapacitated." Then he slid another page toward me, the hospital lamp catching the ink. At the bottom was a familiar looping signature, mine, except I had never written it. "Forgery," James said flatly. "Notarized by someone tied to HR. This document declares you unfit to lead and transfers CEO authority to another." My stomach knotted as I traced the lines. It was my name, without my will, the signature of a trap designed to hand my position to my sister. "She's behind this," I whispered through clenched teeth. James nodded. And this notary is the weak link that ties the fraud together. The next morning, at his urging, a private investigator arrived. Brenda Walsh, also in her 30s with a razor-sharp bob and eyes like steel, opened her laptop on the hospital tray. "James briefed me," she said. "I'll start with the money trail." The screen lit up with bank statements. Brenda pointed. "Here, transfers from your sister's account to Jacob Walsh in sales. $5,000 twice last month." My pulse dropped. Jacob, who had played loyal in every meeting, exposed as bought. For what I asked. Brenda tapped further. "Company logs show he altered project notes after your accident, crediting her instead of you. A bribe for rewriting history." The truth burned, but I didn't flinch. Against medical orders, I signed myself out temporarily, grabbed my crutches, and met my sister at a quiet cafe off Ward Parkway. In my jacket pocket, a recorder was already running legal under Kansas's one-party consent law. She arrived in jeans latte in hand, wearing smugness like a crown. "Out already," she smirked, dropping into the chair. I kept my voice steady. "We need to talk." Steam rose from the cups like a curtain between us. She spoke first. "The company's on track. Someone had to step up while you recovered." I leaned in. "Step up or steal the CEO seat from me?" She laughed, short and sharp. "Be realistic. From a hospital bed, how could you possibly lead? The funding is safe in my hands." Every word landed clean into the mic, undeniable. I swallowed my rage, let her talk, then left. Back in the hospital, I played the recording for James. Her voice poured from the speaker like knives. James's eyes lit up. Perfect. Direct evidence of intent. That night, Brenda called again, voice steady but heavy. I found more. Family texts. On my screen appeared screenshots, messages my sister had sent Joseph the night of the accident. "Keep quiet, everything's been handled." His reply, "Got it, but risky." Simple words that struck like a hammer. Joseph, the quiet shadow in our family, had stayed silent. He ignored my calls, erased his fear, but not his complicity. Brenda's tone was clinical. A passive accomplice. The texts prove he chose silence over truth. I stared at the screen, feeling the final thread snap. Family, the word once meant sanctuary, was now nothing but a chain of betrayal. There were no illusions left, only the raw truth, the treachery, and my resolve to burn the whole scheme down. The next week, as I started physical therapy in the rehab wing of the Kansas City Hospital, the pieces of the betrayal puzzle began to click into place. Palms slick on the therapy bar, I forced myself forward every tiny step, a reminder that the road ahead would be brutal. Dr. Andrea Reed came by during a break, white coat, immaculate, a stack of reports under her arm. "The forensic review is back," she said, sitting on the bench beside me. "We audited your records end to end." She flipped through pages, pointing at access logs lit up in red spikes at 23/17/02/04/04/11 a.m., all traced to the same IP routed through the company VPN. "This isn't accidental," she said. "Someone with admin privileges injected falsified data to simulate prolonged cognitive decline." My heart dropped. This was digital forgery, a phantom hand extending my incapacity to clear the path for my sister. "So there's collusion," I croaked. Andrea nodded. "Unmistakable. Serve a subpoena on those logs, and the whole petition collapses." While I stretched my hamstrings, my phone buzzed. April whispering from the office. I dug up something in the cloud backup, followed by a bundle of files. My tablet loaded a slide deck destined for investors with the headline, "Interim CEO Tracy Turner presents app enhancements." My sister's photo sat on the title page. The UI flow diagrams were my wireframes down to the pixel grid, and the revenue forecasts were the very numbers I'd calculated at midnight for our pitch. April ground her teeth. "She's selling your work as hers. Board meeting next week, they're swallowing this lie whole." I gripped the railing until my knuckles blanched. Everything I'd sweated and lost sleep over was being repackaged as someone else's triumph. That night, James Reed joined a video call from his office. light cutting across his face, and laid out our legal play. We have fraud and conspiracy. The medical records are the spearhead emails. Tie your sister directly to the board. Tomorrow, I file in Kansas City to lift the freeze and subpoena the VPN logs. He highlighted actions, court orders, HR depositions, preservation of evidence in Colorado, and set a 10-day hearing window. We pull every thread, he said. No loopholes. Each PT rep I forced my leg through pulled up memories of the Overland Park cul-de-sac, where the favoritism began me at 5, building a block tower for show and tell, while she knocked it down and took the applause. Me at 12, staying up all night on a science fair ecosystem that she quietly relabeled and presented as her own. Dad beamed. Mom snapped photos. I cleaned up the pieces. Patterns hardened into privilege and privilege into audacity. Now those childhood games had metastasized into a multi-million-dollar scheme, but the same impulse that drove her then was exposed by the logs and the slides now. The evidence was my lever. The betrayal that had left me immobile and betrayed was the fuel for the fight. I was no longer a passive victim. With James's legal firepower and April's tech forensics, I would unmask every conspirator and reclaim what was mine. Every email, every forged medical note, every altered access log was both proof of the crime and the key to reversing it. And this time, I wasn't going to let them get away with stealing my life. After a month of preparation, I stepped out of the taxi on crutches, a cold sweat running down my spine, and pushed open the heavy glass doors of the office tower at Country Club Plaza. The sharp thud of my crutches on the marble floor echoed like a war drum announcing the confrontation ahead. In the elevator, my chest felt heavy, and when the doors opened, I saw the boardroom with its walls of glass, and inside sat my family lined up as if they were self-appointed judges, their authority built on forged signatures and lies. I paused only for a breath at the threshold before walking straight in. The room froze. My mother lurched back her chair, clattering to the floor as she gripped the table edge for balance. "Oh God, no, it can't be," she gasped, her face drained like she'd seen a ghost. My father stiffened, pen slipping from his hand and rolling across the floor. My brother turned away, shoulders hunched, unable to meet my eyes, and my sister, the one who had always basked in stolen spotlights, went pale, the mask of composure cracking. "You're not supposed to be here," she tried to snap, but her voice trembled. I let the silence weigh on them, 6 months of abandonment pressing back at once. "I came to take my place," I said, low but firm. No one answered. The board members shifted uncomfortably, whispers cutting the air, but my family sat paralyzed. I turned and walked out without another word, their stunned silence. My first victory. 2 weeks later, the courtroom in Kansas City was packed, the air thick wooden benches creaking under the crowd. James Reed stood at the podium, suit crisp, voice ringing like a hammer. "Your Honor, we have undeniable proof of fraud and a coordinated scheme to usurp the CEO seat." He played an audio recording. My sister's voice filled the chamber, cold and smug, from a hospital bed. How could she possibly lead? My mother clapped a hand over her mouth. Murmurs rippling through the room. James projected bank statements next, payments highlighted in glaring yellow, $5,000 wired twice to Jacob Walsh, who sat sweating a few rows away. Emails and presentation slides followed my work, paraded under my sister's name. Dr. Andrea Reed testified that the medical files had been falsified, timestamps aligning to the exact nights the petition was filed. This was no accident, James concluded. This was a systematized conspiracy. My sister rose heels, striking like gunfire, insisting I did it, for the company eyes darting from the judge. But the recording replayed every word, stripping her defense bare. Jacob was called, his voice shaking, as he muttered, "I just followed orders. I thought it was internal adjustments." Under cross-examination, he broke the denial, collapsing under the weight of evidence. Finally, I took the stand. Setting my crutches aside, fists clenched, voice tight, but cutting through the air. They forged my signature. They sold my work. And worst of all, they are my blood and they chose silence. My family became conspirators. I am not here to weep. I am here to reclaim my place. The courtroom fell into a silence heavier than shouting. My father's eyes dropped, my brother fidgeted, avoiding my gaze. At last the judge raised her gavel, her voice sharp and thunderous. The evidence is irrefutable. This was an organized, deliberate conspiracy. She fixed her eyes on my family. Tracy Turner, 3 years prison restitution of $100,000. Jacob Walsh, 18 months community service, $20,000 in fines. Mr. and Mrs. Turner, civil liability of $50,000 for complicity. Joseph Turner, professional license revoked indefinitely. The gavel slammed, reverberating through the chamber. I closed my eyes, hearing the chains fall away. Freedom was not just the verdict, it was the moment I stood tall, carrying my own name back into the world. After the final strike of the gavel in the Kansas City courtroom, everything unraveled so fast I could barely breathe. My sister walked out with a 3-year suspended sentence, the face that once commanded boardrooms now reduced to hushed whispers in the hallway. Her phone went silent, the eager contacts that once circled her vanishing without a trace. Tech journals called her out by name, branding her a fraud, a stain no resume could ever conceal. Jacob, the man who once nodded beside me at every meeting, was fined $20,000 and fired on the spot. His LinkedIn profile became a public scarlet letter in the tech world, a bribe taker. My brother, who had hidden a neutrality for so long, lost his job overnight, his CPA license suspended. The silence he believed would shield him became proof of betrayal, and colleagues turned their backs, leaving him in a crushing solitude. My parents didn't escape either. $50,000 in civil damages shattered their retirement dream. In the suburbs of Overland Park, the neighbors who once waved them over for backyard barbecues now looked away. My father was struck from the community council, polite greetings replaced by cautious stares. The family honor they clung to so tightly lay exposed like a rotting tree stump. A week later, I returned to Country Club Plaza, no crutches this time, but a cane in my hand, and sat down in the CEO chair that had always been mine. Hands clasped in renewed trust around me, investments unlocked, products launched with force. My name once again etched on the glass door. But in that victory, the family tie was gone. No calls, no holiday greetings, not even a hollow apology. That night, I packed my things from the Overland Park house, left the keys on the counter, and drove to my new apartment along the Missouri River. City lights reflected across the ceiling, the silence pure, untouched by favoritism or lies. Relief washed over me like layers of old skin peeling away. From the settlement, I sent $500,000 to a Kansas City nonprofit that shelters survivors of family abuse, offering legal aid, safe houses, and therapy groups. At the opening event, I stood before silent faces and spoke steadily. Betrayal from family leaves scars no court can erase. But support can build a new road. I shared my isolation and watched it transform into strength for others. It wasn't triumph, it was purpose. My family may have abandoned me, but I never abandoned myself, and that saved me, carried me from victim to author of my own law. That will is what turns pain into power. In the end, I realized family is not always a refuge. Sometimes it is the storm itself. The journey from a lonely hospital bed to the CEO's chair taught me the hardest truth. Self-worth isn't measured by recognition from blood, but by the will to rise from ashes. I turned betrayal into fuel, fraud into justice, and isolation into strength, not for revenge, but for rebirth. Tonight, in my Missouri River apartment watching Kansas City glitter, I no longer seek their forgiveness. I forgive myself for believing in false promises. This story is more than mine. It's a reminder for anyone battling the shadows of family. You are strong enough to break the chains, bold enough to build your own empire. Turn your scars into weapons and remember, true freedom begins the moment you choose yourself. Have you ever faced betrayal from those closest to you? Would you choose forgiveness or freedom? Share your story in the comments, it might light the way for someone else. And if you see yourself in my journey, hit the heart subscribe and stay with me for the next chapter.